Dennis Tan.
Question for Dean, sir.
Mr. Speaker, I thank Mr. Tan for that question, and I beg the indulgence of the House to give a somewhat detailed answer. The BBNJ Treaty is an international, legally binding instrument under the United Nations Convention of the Law of the Sea for the conservation and the sustainable use of marine biological diversity of areas beyond national jurisdiction. There has been significant concern for many years about the degradation of the marine environment and the depletion of resources in the high seas and the deep seabed. This refers to the waters in the seabed beyond the 200 nautical mile exclusive economic zones and the continental shelf of countries, and therefore is beyond the jurisdiction of any particular country. There is an urgent need for collective action to address the urgent threats confronting our oceans, including the issues of climate change and biodiversity loss. The BBNJ Treaty is thus a historic achievement and a critical boost for global efforts to protect the marine environment. The treaty covers nearly 2/3 of the ocean. It is an important step towards achieving Sustainable Development Goal 14 to conserve and sustainably use the oceans, the seas, and the marine resources for sustainable development, as well as the global target to protect 30% of the world's land, inland waters, coastal areas, and oceans by 2030. First, the treaty enables a more holistic regulation of the marine environment in areas beyond national jurisdiction. This has hitherto been fragmented across different regional and sectoral organizations that oversee the individual issues such as fisheries management and maritime shipping. It will fill some of these regulatory gaps. It will promote coordination across different regional and sectoral bodies and provide greater clarity on what is required for the assessment of environmental impacts for activities in these areas. Second, the treaty seeks to address some of the inequalities amongst states in their ability to manage and to use the resources of areas beyond national jurisdiction. It provides for greater and more equitable sharing of the benefits arising from marine scientific research in these areas for all countries. And it will boost capacity building efforts for developing countries to better conserve and to sustainably use the marine biodiversity and to implement this treaty. We are very proud that a Singaporean, the Ambassador for Oceans and Law of the Sea Issues, Ms. Rina Lee, presided over the 5 intergovernmental conference sessions which were held between 2018 to 2023, and that this successfully led to the conclusion of the treaty negotiations. Rina's able and tireless leadership towards this long and arduous process brought countries together towards achieving a consensus outcome and reaffirmed Singapore's position on the global stage as a trusted interlocutor and a bridge builder, as well as underlined our leading role in developing the international law of the sea. The successful conclusion of the negotiations is also a strong affirmation that multilateralism remains effective and relevant, and a rules-based international order is needed more than ever before to resolve global issues. These outcomes are relevant and beneficial to Singapore. By codifying scientific best practices across jurisdictions and giving effect to the principle of open science, the BBNJ Treaty will augment our institutes of higher learning as well as maritime companies' access to deep sea samples, thereby creating new opportunities for our R&D sector. Through the treaty, our scientists, working with repositories such as the Lee Kong Chian Natural History Museum in the NUS, and agencies like A-STAR, as well as the National Research Foundation, will find it easier to obtain access to information and to samples of the marine organisms for their research. Singapore can also contribute to the objectives of the treaty in a variety of ways. In the immediate term, we can work with other countries and regional and international organizations towards the early ratification and the effective implementation of the treaty. In the longer term, we can support capacity building efforts for developing countries by sharing our experience and expertise through the Ministry of Foreign Affairs Singapore Cooperation Program. And Singaporeans can also contribute to combating climate change and protecting our own environment and oceans by living sustainably and by practicing zero-waste lifestyles. To conclude, the oceans, whether they lie within exclusive economic zones or in the high seas beyond national jurisdiction, are all interconnected. The waters and the marine biodiversity in them move freely across borders. This means that whatever happens in the areas beyond national jurisdiction can and will have an impact on us in Singapore, be it in terms of biodiversity loss, environmental degradation, or in the ocean climate nexus. We are therefore privileged and honored to have been able to play a part in ensuring the conservation and the sustainable use of our oceans through the BBNJ treaty negotiations. And we will certainly continue to support this crucial endeavor.
Mr. Tan.
Thank the Foreign Minister for his detailed reply. May I join the Foreign Minister in also commending Ms. Rina Lee for her leadership in her capacity as President of the UN Conference for the BBNJ and her excellent work in facilitating for the agreement of many nations for the text for the landmark treaty on the BBNJ, which I understand is an effort that's taken so many years. I have two supplementary questions. The first is this, the signing of the treaty is only the beginning. The devil is in the details, and there are a number of details to agree to in the coming months, if not longer. And as we know in international law, the initial agreement to the treaty is just a first step. It is important that all countries will also ratify and introduce their local laws in as short as possible a time so that we can all start reaping the benefits of the treaty. So will the Minister share with the House what he sees as some of the challenges in getting as many countries to sign up and ratify so that the treaty can be properly enforced sooner rather than later? And this is especially given the competitive nature of the world fisheries and mining industries. The second supplementary question, how would the government encourage or even ensure that Singaporean businesses will only source from sustainable fisheries and undersea mining in compliance with the requirement of this convention? Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Tan is absolutely right. The challenge now, having concluded the negotiations on the text, is to get countries to ratify and, more importantly, to actually implement. And it will require, at a domestic level, policies and legislation and programs to do so. I will not underestimate the effort needed to persuade everyone to come on board. And that's why I've dealt with this at some length, because in fact we need, not just within Singapore, but across the world, for everyone to understand why the oceans and the marine biodiversity in the high seas and on the seabed, the natural resources, in a sense, the natural heritage of all mankind, is important and worthy of protection. To be honest with you, this requires political support. I'm glad that at least in the case of Singapore, I think in this House I can say there's unanimous support for the protection of the environment, for dealing with climate change, for conserving marine biodiversity, and equally important, a fair and equitable approach to how we extract resources sustainably in areas both within our own jurisdiction as well as areas outside. The point is, I'm very grateful for your support, but I'm also saying that there will be challenges internationally. What will these challenges be? On a couple of fronts. Number one, the unequal capacities of countries already causes a challenge, because there will be some countries who have the technology and therefore have a head start to exploit and gain even sometimes an unfair advantage over others. This is one reason why this treaty is so important, because it sets common rules for everyone. Second, this treaty also ensures that there is a more equitable distribution of the benefits that derive from the extraction and the exploitation of this natural heritage of all of us. Third, training capacity building, which will also require sharing between countries. And in the case of Singapore, I mean, we have a, one of the most important programs that we run on the international front is capacity building. And in the sense of uplifting as many, both officials, students, scientists, as across the board as we can, we will continue to do so. But I would also say we do need transparency, and which actually brings me to your second point. How do you ensure compliance? Because these are areas which are beyond jurisdiction. It's not, I will not trivialize how difficult it will be to hold people to account. But I believe that if there is broad-based public support in all countries, and we have a system with sufficient transparency so you know which companies or which institutions, what they're doing, where, and the impact of their activities. I think that transparency will help ensure compliance. So again, I just want to say again, I'm grateful for your interest in this area and for your support, and I hope this is the same situation in parliaments all over the world.